and Russia have been stockpiling gold at a great rate, and it's important to notice that. And for 4 years, when I first started talking about especially precious metals, it was look at China, look at Russia, they're stockpiling gold. And for a country that has lots of great gold mines, Canada has no gold. And it kind of makes sense when you see how they're running the show here. But if you were going to be a superpower, or if you had any intentions of being an economic leader, then you would want to own commodities and you'd want to have a stockpile of them. So it was always interesting to me that they had been stockpiling gold and they had been, net buyers. When I'm talking about that, we've just listed here Sprott. I mean, this is one of the go-to people when you're talking about commodities investing, especially if you're talking about precious metals investing. If you want, to have this link or not, some of the reasons why one should own gold, we're happy to send it. But for me, I understand the flight to a cryptocurrency right now, and with Russia as well. If you're a citizen there and you think, oh my God, how our economy is being devastated by these sanctions, once again, rightfully or wrongfully, it doesn't matter. It just factually, that's bolstered those who like crypto because they think, okay, as a regular person, why am I being punished for the government doing something? And as we know here in the West, just because your government does something doesn't mean that I have any say in changing their mind. We've had protests and whatnot for things in the past, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't work. But the notion that it's the will of the people is not the case anymore. I mean, there's lots of people, both in Ukraine and Russia, that have no interest in having any kind of war. But we are in this situation. And we're in this situation where we're doing a great reset and we're doing all this. So it doesn't go without notice, I would say. And I'm not going to try to put all the puzzle pieces together. And also, I wouldn't pretend to know. But it is interesting, the fact that they had been stockpiling a lot of commodities. And one of the things that we could see for sure was that nickel squeeze that happened with the one trader out of China. I think he was a $5 billion loss because one of the biggest mines, zinc mines, is in Russia. So that's a shutoff of massive supply of zinc to the market, which is also used in a number of things, including battery energy metals. So when you look at a country like Russia, who a lot of people would say, well, it's not very powerful, it's not very strong. It is resource rich, and that precious metals component, generally speaking, if you see countries stockpiling commodities, it's usually a precursor to war. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but that's generally, if one looks at a lot of military, kind of historical military books, that kind of action shows a willingness to. It's kind of like whenever you have the castle, you're storing food in the castle, you're waiting, you're getting ready, you're preparing for something. And certainly China and Russia have been doing that for a long time at alarming rates. And for me, without getting too much into the whole question of gold versus crypto, is that's an interesting philosophical discussion. And that would be maybe a discussion, when you're not in a panic. But there's a reason why all of these governments and these central banks were buying gold. I mean, the reason why China is buying gold, the reason why Russia was buying gold, is because they consider that to be the store of capital. And it wasn't that, hey, we're going to create a cryptocurrency and do this. That wasn't the case. So all this other talk about, well, we feel that crypto could be this, it could be that. Okay, maybe it could. But in reality, in what we have today, is commodities are it. And you're not ever going to go around a government. So, I mean, that at the end of the day is just factual. And even each year, as technology gets stronger, and whether we start adopting all of these new technologies and the social credit score, which is certainly something we'll talk about in the future here, your chances of being able to have any privacy or have any kind of transaction that you may not want people to know about will be completely gone. Everything will be traced and tracked. And that, once again, people say, oh, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, it's not a big deal. It's like, well, that's not the point. I don't want people knowing that I'm buying Twinkies every week or whatever it is. It's none of your business. That's just a little disturbing whenever everything you do is accounted and tracked and tabulated. But that's beside the point. But that is kind of in with this conversation, because we do kind of talk about this whole shift that's going on for years. And this has been ongoing, and people are saying, say with energy and say with, the price of oil and gas, it's going up because of this conflict. It's like, no, it was going up regardless. That was happening. And we were talking about the show back in September, back in August. We were talking about Europe and the incredible problems they were having with energy because they don't have a strategy. It's this notion of, we're going to stop using energy. We're going to not use nuclear. We're not going to use oil and gas, but we don't have any other solutions that we've actually got ready on a large scale to do. And as you know, I'm all for any of these solutions, but they're not overnight type of solutions. They take a lot of time to implement. And also, the first sign that they're actually serious about doing this type of thing would be massive investment in mining. And I haven't seen that yet. We've seen a little bit. We've seen a little bit of a recognition, especially from the Biden administration, which is a very big step forward, that all of these solutions, and we said this for years, for the climate issues, they all stem from mining. If you're going to switch your energy and you're going to talk about electric future, if you're talking about copper, you're talking about lithium, you're talking about all these batteries, this comes from the ground. So until we see a big, huge push by governments and by those who have vested interest in the shift in energy, where there'll be massive money made. And this is why I liken it to, the 20s, whenever we had a big energy shift. There was massive chaos. It was not good for most people, but if you had invested in gold and in energy, you would have made out like a bandit. This I don't see as being much different. Now, the escalation of things with Russia has lots of other varying, factors that are attributed to it as well. Because if you think the default of Lehman Brothers was a big deal, if the Russian government defaults on payments that it has to any number of countries in the West or any other countries, that ripple effect is massive as well. And we won't go into detail as to what that would look like. But as a threat back, because of the massive devaluation of the ruble from kind of this weaponized attack from the West and NATO, is that Russia's shot back, kind of shots fired, saying, okay, fine, we'll make our debt payment, but we're making it in rubles. Now, you could do that with confidence if you had your backup being gold. And you said, yeah, well, I don't care, because we have most of our wealth sitting in commodity based anyway. If you destroy our currency, yeah, it hurts the people. We'll bounce back. We have a solution. Now, that's a little tinfoil hatty. I don't know if they're that far ahead. But if you've set yourself up that you have options, which they certainly do, that's interesting that they've done that. It brings more curious, like, okay, they'd been stockpiling this. They'd known ahead of time. They'd gone into Crimea in 2014, and now they're back in Ukraine. Okay, interesting. And it brings into the relationship that's ever growing and stronger is their relationship with China. Will China be next to move on Taiwan? So we're seeing a lot of things moving at a very rapid rate, and it's obviously disconcerting, not surprising, but once again, leaving all politics aside, is that it just reaffirms that there is this shift happening. Nothing goes according to plan, even if you have the best plan in the world. I'm not saying that I say with this great reset, we have the smartest or best people involved, but some of these things are going to go forward and some of them are not. And if nothing else, they're going to be spending trillions of dollars to make certain things happen. And that's kind of been our whole kind of mindset here. And your foundation for all of this comes from the ground. And that's why we talk about fertilizer, why we have Brian Ostroff on, why we've had companies like Verde Agritech, who's in Brazil. We're looking at all these fertilizer companies that play such a critical role in food production. And once again, people kind of get lost in, well, it's boring. It is. Listen, I'll be honest, it can be boring. I find it fascinating because when you're talking about food production and you see so few players, Canada being one of the big players with Nutrien, used to be Saskatchewan Potash, and I think Agrium. This is also affected because Russia and Belarus account for about 50% of all potash. I think Russia alone is nearly 20% of nitrogen, which is also for fertilizer. So now you're talking about food production. And Brian kind of illuminated on that last Friday. The incredible, there's a sincere issue going on here with food production. And it isn't a scare thing. I mean, if you're seeing it in the shelves here in the West, that's a problem. But where you're really going to see it is you're going to see it in those top 10 list of companies that he had on. That was, Malaysia, a lot of the Middle East, countries like that where they're dependent. So what's that look like? You can imagine now the choices whenever people think it's very simple. If you're Biden or a world leader to go, you have to do this. The ripple effects of going to war with a major country like this, because we're all so interwoven, you can now start to see how difficult that becomes, because you're now affecting lives in other developing nations that will now not get food supply. There's nothing you can do. It's not like the U.S. can go, hey, we're going to deliver food. It's not going to happen. So it isn't just as simple as saying, okay, we're going to do this because it's quote unquote the right thing to do. There's a million other factors in the markets that are dependent and varying. So not a fun job to have that. But I just kind of like to put that out there when people think of how complex this type of thing gets when it starts to be another major world power. And this, we're very much in a precarious situation for sure, and the narratives are tough to follow. The level of misinformation out there is shocking on both sides. So it's even hard to know what's actually happening. But in the end of the day, what we do know for sure is the effects on markets is really shattering. It's incredible. Even if they were to have clean up peace talks right away in a hurry, that trust has been eroded. And this notion that, I kind of say, like, why can't we all just get along? Or in this whole thing, like we're all the same and it's one world. It's a silly utopian belief that people put out there. And we can see it now very quickly, how that doesn't exist. That is going to escalate as well. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's just human nature. And you're dealing with power. And when you have consolidation of power and when you have big shifts happening, those who wish to seek power are going to utilize and maximize their own benefit. And until we see China announce its intentions, that's the main factor we're going to see. We're waiting now to see what's happening with Russia and what this means to the markets. Now, for us, it just reconfirms the desperate need for energy in the meantime. So there's, gas is going to do very well. We said like Alberta should be opening up and they should be maximizing potential right now. It's shocking that they don't. They should be doing all these things. And once again, not because I'm saying that they should scrap their climate, approach and shift of energy, is that you require it for a short period of time. You can mandate it for a short period of time. You just mandate all sorts of crazy stuff without any science. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but we know that for sure now from all the reports out. Why can't you do it for an energy solution that also is building towards that's future you want to see that's going to be electric? There's a million things that they could do and they could be focused on. And quite frankly, they should be focused on. But that's another conversation. But this was just a bit of a heads up to kind of give people a bit of an idea of the varying and complicated interwoven issues that are here, especially when you're talking about commodities, because it can be lost, when you're talking about ammonia or nitrogen or potash. People think, oh, this, I don't even know what that's about. I mean, it's food. And the way we make food today is not, the farmer, the cute farmer on the land in the prairies. That doesn't really exist anymore. It's massive agricultural industrial business, and that is threatened now. Never mind the fact that we talk about supply chain issues and all the other commodities. And the other thing I just wanted to touch on before we just step off, because this has a launching pad of 10, 15, 20 other conversations one can have, and they're important and they're necessary, is just also the need and the reflection on like helium. Like, it's once again something that people aren't really thinking about, but even Bloomberg put out just last month, helium prices are set to soar as the supply shortage looms. This is something we've kind of talked about for a while. In our last newsletter, I put out some news about two major production facilities, one which was in Russia, that's been shut down now, I think, for a year to 18 months prior to the invasion, there was going to be this supply shortage. And once again, you think, okay, well, it's helium. Like, why do I care? It's party balloons. We're big fans, obviously, of those who know the show. We're big fans of helium because it's a critical gas. It's absolutely critical for high tech. So that's your nuclear reactors, your magnetic resonance machines, for in the hospitals when you're getting different work done. And then, of course, any of the big data storage facilities, so huge like 5G data storage, you need to cool those computers. And certainly, obviously, is the crypto mining. Those use these very high-powered video chips that heat up very quickly, and they have like stadiums full of this, and you need to keep them cool, and that coolant is high-grade helium. So what does that matter? Absolutely. As we're pushing more technology further and further, you require, and everything's going digital, everything's going to like a shared stored cloud. All of that means you need tons of helium. And now there's a shortage. So that's a bit of a shout out to Desert Mountain Energy. We keep on telling you that they're on track, but there's other helium companies as well. And there's been a lot more that have come into the market because they're recognizing that this is an opportunity. So a bit of a rant, a bit of a kind of a chat, a bit of a reconfirmation of the markets are very strange. It's very tense out there. The world is very tense out there. And, it isn't that one's trying to make money off of bad events, but I look at this as being, if you're funding ventures that are going towards fertilizer to make food, then you're part of the solution. So if you're investing in the right companies that are recognizing, and make no mistake, as Brian was saying when he's down in Tampa, these folks have known about this for a long time. They haven't been quiet about it. They've been reaching out saying there's a problem. There's a supply chain problem, and there's a food shortage problem here if we're not careful. So it isn't that this is just brand new and no one's mentioned it. This is information that's been going on for years. It's just these massive events are now highlighting these issues that we've had. And that, is hard for people to understand that it isn't. They like to just think, oh, Putin did this. It's like, no. He hasn't done anything as far as the energy crisis, and he hasn't done anything as far as the food shortage crisis. They certainly made it worse, but all of these issues existed much before, and now one would say that maybe they're utilizing it for their own best interest. And once again, this is why you need to have people in power that are taking care of their country for the best interest of their people, because that's what's supposed to happen. And I know that's very unfavorable in the progressive PC world, but that's just a fact of life, and we're going to learn that lesson a fairly hard way in the next years ahead. But in any event, I've ranted too long. It's the day after St. Patrick's Day. It's probably too heavy for people to have to hear. And I want to give a good shout out to people. And once again, stay strong. Look at your model and what you're investing in. Take a look at the macro events and what's affected. And that's why we look at some of these events and think, what companies and what countries are affected by these types of embargoes and sanctions, and what's that look like. And there's plenty of opportunity to fund the things that want to get the outcomes that you want. And that's, I think, the message that we want to relay, and also to focus your energy on the solutions rather than all the time on the negative, because the negative is overwhelming. And if you're set in a negative state of mind right from the morning, right, stressed out about what's happening and the poor people of Ukraine and the suffering, and also the suffering of the people who have no interest in war in Russia, who are facing complete ruin. There's lots of suffering that's going on. And if you want to be part of the solution, it's then find those companies that are actively looking for those kinds of solutions and invest in them. That's the one thing that we can do. Posting little flags and posting stuff on Facebook is great virtue signaling, but really doesn't do anything. But in any event, put your money where your mouth is, and invest in those things that you want to see happen in the future. That way your values and your economic benefit are aligned as they should be. And that leads us into a conversation we'll have down the road here, which is what the Great Reset, ESG, World Economic Forum, their idea of stakeholder capitalism. We'll leave it at that. If you want to look that up, look it up, but we're going to chat about that soon. And everyone, have a great weekend. I wish Vinny very well. Thank you for coming and helping us out. We wish our best wishes to our good friend Adam, that he gets well soon. And of course, Austin has a great time in Cancun, and enjoys his time there. And we'll see everyone very soon.